I have the pleasure of introducing a good friend and a colleague at Sacramento State. He's currently the Cerna Center Coordinator, and Michael Lemus will be taking us through a journey of storytelling and his personal journey to becoming emotionally fulfilled in the field of student affairs. He will also introduce you to the law of attraction and manifestation work as it relates to reclaiming your own happiness and that of your students. So Michael, please join us.
See, I'm a millennial, so I'm like, I should understand how to use this mic, right? Hello, everyone. So I want to first start off by just thanking you. I just want to say that I'm so humbled and honored to have you in attendance and to really have you just be here in a sense of vulnerability for sure for me. I'm about to get very personal and share a journey that I've been going through the last, I would say, year and a half, and really get vulnerable and share some dark moments, but also some really positive moments and share where I'm at now. And so I'm calling this Reclaiming Your Happiness, Manifesting Emotional Fulfillment in Your Life and that of your students, because I think that it's really important for us to go ahead and think about our own personal and professional development and how it then goes in terms of our student personal, professional development. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my clicker here. So I'm gonna first start off with a story, and that story is gonna take us back to exactly a year ago at the NASPA Western Regional Conference in Hawaii. So I had the privilege of being awarded the New Professional Award for Region 6. Thank you so much. And I share that not because I wanna go ahead and tell you all I got an award. It's not about that. I share that because when that happened and when I went back to my day-to-day work, it was a point in my life when I was the most depressed and anxious that I had ever been. And to most people that were probably at that conference and saw me win that award, you probably thought that I was at the prime of my career, that I was super happy, that everything was going right. And I got really, really good at hiding it. And that's something that I really want to share with everyone because unfortunately what I've seen just even in the couple of years that I've been in the profession is that a lot of people get really good at hiding it. Hiding the fact that they are depressed every day and that they are anxious and that they're having panic attacks in meetings, which I was having. And I really want to go ahead and share that with you because I want us to go ahead and have a conversation around that and how we actually communicate that to our students and what they're going through, because a lot of them are also experiencing, especially with the nature of just our nation in general and how divided we are, they're also experiencing a lot of similar things that we don't share. And so I wanted to go ahead and again, just be vulnerable in this space with you all to go ahead and let you know that at that point, as happy as I was to get that award, when I returned back to my reality and what I was going through at the time, I was in a very, very sad and dark place. And what I realized is that I needed to go ahead and find myself again and reclaim what I'm saying. When I say reclaim my happiness, I was being very serious about that in terms of the choices that I needed to make to get to that point. Which leads me to the next point, which is recognizing your own worth. And so when I started to think about that, I realized that I was relying a lot on external validation from other people. And I was fortunate enough that, I put in really good work during grad school. I was really involved. I got really involved in NASPA. And so I did have a lot of recognition and I had a lot of external validation. And so when I first experienced for the first time in a professional setting, a space in which I was not supported, in which my identity was not embraced, especially as a person of color, and when I tried to go ahead and advocate for myself, and I will say that I'm someone that feels comfortable in advocating for myself, but when we think of those that are not comfortable or are afraid that if they do advocate for themselves, they're gonna lose their job. Let's think about that, because I had the privilege to be in a space, at least personally, that I felt like I can advocate for myself in that sense and make some decisions that I can go ahead and move forward. But some people in their day-to-day don't have that ability to do that. And so the purpose of this presentation is to go ahead and talk about this idea of positive thinking and think about it in terms of an equitable framework, because we can't all just have an eat, pray, love experience, y'all. So we don't all have that type of money. So we can't all just do that, right? And so I want to go ahead and showcase my experience on an individual experience that really involved a lot of interpersonal work. It didn't require a lot of money, but it did require a lot of work. And I'm still progressing throughout just my own personal and professional development journey. And again, I think it's important for us to have these conversations with each other so that we're able to feel more comfortable in getting in that vulnerable space. And so a big piece of that is believing that we deserve happiness. And do we all feel like we deserve happiness? Yes. And that's super important because at the point last year when I was, again, got that award, I was happy in the moment. And I was super happy to be around people that I love dearly. But when I went back to my reality, my 40, 50 hours a week type reality, I was no longer in that space. And I didn't believe that I deserved that happiness. If anything, I didn't want to share the fact that I was recognized at this regional conference because I was around a lot of people that were very toxic and were not happy for me. And so with that, I want to take us into some next steps. So the power of investing in yourself. So I made a very deliberate decision when I hit, and I will say rock bottom in that sense, when I was literally walking into a meeting with a Starbucks cup in hand, and I broke down in tears because I couldn't deal with it anymore. And I was so, again, just anxious and depressed, and I was having panic attack in meetings anytime that I was looking at, let's say, a student file being showcased on through the projector. I had internalized the oppression of other people that they had bestowed upon me for a lot of different reasons. I had internalized imposter syndrome, that I was around such toxic people in a very toxic environment that became my norm. And so I started to forget a lot of my own self-worth. And I no longer believed that I deserved that happiness. And again, when you're in that place, it's really, really hard to get out of it. But again, when I hit that point where I just cried with the Starbucks cup in my hand, I realized this needs to change because this can't be my norm. And I also realized that in our profession, in student affairs, this is more common often than not, unfortunately. And the amount of us that really need to go to counseling, for example, because of what we're experiencing with our own colleagues and our peers, taking that into account, like, yes, it's in our benefits, but I mean, really, should we be going through that? Because it's not fair. And so with that, I think it's super important that, again, we invest in ourselves, that we go beyond just the idea that, yes, we need to self-care. Like, what does that really look like for us? And for some of us, that looks like the bath bomb at the end of the night. For some of us, it looks like taking a hike. For some of us, it also looks like just taking a walk. How many of us forget to eat or just to take a walk in our day-to-day work life? Right? That happens. And I went through a point where I lost 50 pounds. Part of that was because, yes, I was working out, eating more healthy. But the other part was, and a lot of you that are in this room that do know me don't actually know this point, is I lost a lot of that weight because I was forgetting to eat. And I was just so busy and sad that I was just like, I'm just gonna distract myself. And that happens to a lot of us. We distract ourselves from our reality. And again, I reached a point where I was like, this really needs to change. So in terms of what I did, I started to take into account, what do I actually have control of? Because a lot of what I was actually sad about and what really led to my depression were things that were out of my control. It was the perception that other people had on me, for example. It was the belief that I needed this external validation to go ahead and move forward in my career. It was the fact that I was 24 entering a space, in an office space, that people retire out of, and that a lot of people were threatened by that. And were threatened by my identity, were threatened that this young professional was coming into a space in which most people retire out of, and I knew that I was not going to retire out of that space. And so when I started to think about that, I was like, okay, what do I need to do for my physical and mental health? So physical, big stress relief, just to throw out some things, like what do you all do to stress relief? For me, it's exercise. What do other people do? Just yell out. Read, okay, yes. Dancing, Netflix, yes, for real. So we do a lot of different things. We do a lot of different things to de-stress. And so I started to take that into account in terms of what do I do physically, but also mentally. So I went to counseling during that year. I still continue to go to counseling and found it very important to go ahead and heal. And that's what it really came down to. And I realized that it was much more than my day-to-day. It was healing through family trauma, healing through what other people were experiencing. We're in the nature of work in which we absorb a lot of emotion, a lot. In our day-to-day life, we're always experiencing so many different emotions throughout the day. It's very easy for us to take that home. And that was happening on top of all the other toxicity that I was around. And so I started to think about what do I actually have control over when it comes to my thoughts? And so Ruben talked about me introducing this concept of law of attraction. How many people have heard of the law of attraction before? So quite a few. So the law of attraction, for those of you that don't know, is basically that if you have positive thoughts, you will create a positive reality. And while, yes, that is true, for many of those self-help books, and we were learning about the law of attraction, they're not talking about a very important thing. It's how do we actually apply that through an equitable framework? How do we apply that for people of color? How do we apply that for people that are afraid that if they do start to go ahead and have these positive thoughts and want to advocate for themselves, what happens if they're in just such constant fear that they're going to go ahead and, let's say, get fired for advocating for themselves? That's the important piece there that I really wanted to make sure to talk about here, is how do we apply a social justice framework to this reclaiming of your happiness? Because at the end of the day, we all deserve that happiness, no matter what someone tells you, no matter if you've gone through your whole life and people telling you that you don't deserve that happiness. I'm here to tell you that you do, and to really start to believe that you do, because that's the big process, because we often try to save others and love others, but we don't love ourselves. And that's the really big piece there too, because if you don't love yourself, you cannot save someone else. You can't love someone else fully because you're still needing to do that internal work. And that was a lot of what I needed to do. So I changed my environment. I left that place. I made a very deliberate decision, and I remember telling leadership at the time that in order for me to reclaim my happiness, I need to leave this space and I need to leave this external environment. And that was very difficult because being a young professional in that space, I thought I was gonna go ahead and retire from that space. I had gotten into a point in my career where I was already in a prime spot, making really good money. I thought I had already made it in the profession and in terms of where I was at in my age. And then I realized the money wasn't worth me having mental breakdowns. And the money and the people in that space were not worth me not believing in myself. And so with that, I also like to call it that I went on a spiritual journey, because I decluttered. And when I say decluttered, I did a physical declutter, so getting rid of things that no longer serve me, but also, and I don't know if you all do this, but I'm just gonna go ahead and share this, I went on a decluttering of social media in my digital space and unfollowed, deleted, cut out all the things that I felt were no longer serving me, because we hold on to a lot of people for the sake of holding on to people. And when you have a lot of toxicity around you and when that becomes your norm, sometimes you don't even realize that that's what's happening. And I went into a space where I realized if we are no longer serving each other, we don't have to keep this I will call it fakeness going on, because it's not really helping anyone. And so with that spiritual journey, I really took time to heal, mentally, physically, emotionally, to share this story with other people. Because I remember a colleague of mine, where I was at beforehand, saying something that really slapped me in the face, that really stood out to me. And she said, when I'm next to you, I feel like you're always perfectly put together, and I feel like I need to do something different when I'm next to you because of just who you are. And that really stood out to me, because when she said that, that was a point where my depression had hit an all-time high. But again, I had gotten so good at hiding the fact that I was depressed and anxious, and a lot of people thought, here he is, this perfectly put together guy, young professional, has his things together, when in reality, again, there was a lot going on that I was not comfortable sharing. And I find it very important to share this with you all, and again, why I'm so humbled and honored that you all are here to hear this story, because I don't know if this is resonating with you. I hope that it is in some point, that you feel comfortable, if you're not already doing this, to share this with yourself, your peers, your colleagues, and also your students, because again, we are here to serve students, and if we're not having these conversations with our students, how do we expect them to grow and feel comfortable when they get into the roles that we have? And so with that being said, I also thought of how I impact others, and not just my students, but also those that I interact with when I'm leading a space, when I am in charge of a committee. Am I getting vulnerable and sharing those pieces of my spiritual journey with others as well? And so with that, these are actually my two students that I supervise. So this is Oscar and Maribel that are here in this picture. And I share this picture because for the first time, I supervise students in which I'm having these conversations with them. And every Friday we meet in the afternoon and we talk about things that need to get done for the office, of course. But I also have some really powerful conversations with them around what does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean that when you're going through stress or sadness or anxiety or you're thinking about identities, what does that mean for you in your development? And I don't remember when I was a college student having those conversations with a supervisor. As a matter of fact, I don't really remember having a lot of those conversations with people in general. And I find it so important in my own development to go ahead and have these conversations with our students and to have our conversations with my friends, to get vocal, to continue that self-advocacy, but also thinking about it again, going back to that equitable framework, not everyone has the ability to go ahead and do that form of advocacy that I was able to do, for example. And so I'm here to also talk to you about when you're thinking about self-development, when you throw out the word holistic advising, holistic development, it's such a buzzword in our profession. And we also know that, and maybe you'll agree with me, but this profession can also have its dark moments, and it can also be pretty cutthroat, and it's very political. And so when you're not taught that in a formal setting, what does that look like when you're trying to help in your students' development and in your own development? And so this picture here is just very powerful to me because for the first time, I'm starting to have these conversations with people that I supervise. And if I were to have those conversations when I was a college student, I can only imagine where I would be now in terms of just my own development and understanding that it's okay to advocate for yourself. It is okay to remove yourself from toxic environments, even if you think it's the dream job. If you're going through such an experience in which, again, you don't believe in yourself and you are no longer happy, I just want to go ahead and just share it that it is okay to leave. It is okay to leave. It is okay to cut people out. Even if it's those that you are close to, if you are no longer serving each other and they are bringing you down, it is okay to remove yourself from that environment. Because at the end of the day, we are the only people that can make ourselves fully happy. And going through that experience and all the tears and all the panic attacks really led me to this space. And while, yes, every day I am working to go ahead and develop myself, I am in such a better place in just so many ways, just personally, professionally. I know there are many people in this room that have known me for a couple of years, and I think they can even attest to the form of development that they've been able to see just throughout the last year in terms of the decisions that I made very deliberately. And so again, I want you all to just think about what does that advocacy look like for you, and as you're applying that social justice framework to this advocacy, what does it look like for a student when you're telling them, think positively, but then they're going through food insecurity and they're trying to think about how they're gonna feed themselves that day? Let's think about those things and think about the identity pieces. For some people, culturally, it's not a good thing to go ahead and advocate for yourself. If you're asking for a raise or if you're asking to be on a committee, sometimes culturally, we are not told to do that. We should be grateful for what we already have been given. And so it's also, how do we break that down and have those conversations with ourselves and our students? So just to end off, I want to go ahead and just share an additional piece of what I've been doing in terms of the student affairs profession and how I want to go ahead and work with other people in this form of impact and development. And so I created a community because I saw that I was definitely not the only one going through this experience. There are a lot of people in our field that are going through very, very similar experiences, and I realized that there wasn't much conversation around this spirituality, this form of self-development, and removing yourself from toxic environments. There was a lot of conversations around these things happening, but not so much about how you remove yourself, how do we support each other in this profession. And so I decided to create a community. And it first started off with a Facebook page, so that is up there. If you want to follow it, go for it. But it started off with a Facebook page in which I started to go ahead and post some YouTube videos, writing that really helped me to heal and also to go ahead and share out my story. And it was incredible because as I started to share it, there were people from all over the country in the student affairs community that were reaching out to me, thanking me for sharing that story because they hadn't heard anyone else share a similar experience that they were going through. And that was incredibly powerful because I don't know these people, but they were reaching out to me because I shared my story. And I realized how important it actually is to share even those vulnerable, painful pieces for people to feel like they also have a sense of community. So I started to write. That was part of the healing. I started to go ahead and share out through YouTube videos, through pictures, through motivational quotes, through all of those pieces, but really, again, forming in that social justice framework to go ahead and let people know that as I'm going through this journey, I'm also very intentional in knowing that other people, depending on their identity and their frameworks, may look at this differently. So I don't want you all to think that this is the right way to do it. This is the way that I did it that worked for me. And what has led to such incredible growth and just happiness for me. And so that's the reason why I really wanted to go ahead and share this experience. I usually don't get anxious about presentations, but I will say all morning I have been just so scared and so anxious to share this because it's such a personal experience. This isn't me talking about a theoretical framework. It's not talking about assessment. It's me sharing out a piece of vulnerability. And again, if you are wanting to go ahead and partake in this type of community, there are these spaces, but there are many other spaces in which you can get support. And the real big piece and the takeaway that I want you all to have here is that you are not alone in this. Even if it feels like that, because I certainly did feel like that, even though I had plenty of people around me supporting me, I felt like I was just deathly afraid and alone and in such a panic mode. And a lot of people didn't know that because, again, I got very good at hiding it, and I think a lot of us get very good at hiding those types of dark emotions. And the big, again, takeaway here is that you're not alone, and if it's me that you want to reach out to, if it's your family member, your friend, the big piece here is that you deserve the happiness that you are allowed to have. And that's really the piece to go ahead and recognize is that at the end of the day, what does happiness mean for you, and how do you go about reclaiming it? And so as we move forward in that form of self-development and think about that and how it impacts our students, I really hope that you all, after this presentation and the rest of our speakers that are talking about these vulnerable pieces, think about how you are going about reclaiming what you deserve. And so with that, I am just so thankful again for being here, and I appreciate you sharing this space with me.